Chapter 171. A deal. Olivia looked at Ethan, confused. She had nothing to offer him, so how was she supposed to make a deal with him? The cramped space made it difficult for her to breathe. Even her back was sweating due to the heat. Ethan bent over slightly. The water droplets dripped on her cheek from his strand of hair, leaving a cold stain on it. "Stay by my side, then I'll wipe the slate clean with the Fordham family," he proposed sternly. His proposal repeated in her head before she asked calmly while meeting his eyes, "Stay by your side as what?" He paused momentarily. "I can give you anything aside from the title of Mrs. Miller." She said clearly, "So you want me to be your mistress?" The disgraceful word displeased him. He kneaded his eyebrow while explaining, "Aside from a title, we can get along like how we did in the past." The past, she chuckled. Olivia was aware that she should be the meek party in order to win some favor for herself from the negotiation. However, his condition was infuriating her. The balloon of anger was inflating, on the verge of exploding. She grabbed something in the closet. Smiling, she approached him. "Really, you can give me anything that I want." It was a long time since he last saw her smile. Only then did Ethan realize that he wished to see her smile more than resenting her. Bewitched, he nodded. "Yes. What do you want?" Olivia drew closer to him as her lips reached his ear. "I want." Suddenly, the image of her kissing his neck crossed his mind. He gulped his saliva. Next, she hit his head with a box that contained a necktie. "I want you dead. Why can't you just go to hell, you scumbag? I wonder how a human could say such cruel things. Are you out of your mind? You divorced me and now you're asking me to be your mistress. I can't believe an ugly man like you can be this frivolous." Ethan, who was caught off guard, hissed in pain because he didn't see that coming. She grabbed him by the collar. "If you loved me, why would you have Marina by your side? You're engaged to her and yet you won't let me go. Is this your kink? Do you take pleasure in having affairs?" Her beating didn't anger him, but her words did. "Olivia Fordham, shut up. I can never let this off, Ethan Miller. You destroyed my family and made us go bankrupt. My father is in a coma because of you. How could you say that to my face? I'm going to send you to hell today," she shouted. Exasperated, Ethan pulled her out of the closet. Olivia took the chance to punch and kick him. "You want me to be your mistress? Dream it on, you hideous man. I bet you're the reincarnation of Zeus. I've never met someone as frivolous as you are. It's not like there are no other men in this world. Why must I stay by your side?" Her face turned crimson. She continued, "Instead of mistress, I'd rather be your mother. I would have ended your life as soon as I gave birth to you." Her scoldings ticked him off. His eyes were dangerously dark when he raised his hand. She raised her chin at him without a care of the consequence. "Go ahead. It's best you hit me to death right now." Chapter 172. Olivia shut her eyes. She was prepared for the slap, but the expected pain never came. By the time she opened her eyes, he walked away while holding the gray suit she had chosen. He slammed the door shut with a loud thud, leaving her alone in the room. She slid onto the floor as her knees became weak. A moment ago, she was so livid that she didn't realize she was sweating. Her body was trembling, too. But she didn't know if it was out of anger or fear. Ethan's gaze was so frightening that she thought she was never going to make it until tomorrow. It was her first time reprimanding him ever since they got together. She bet she was the first person to do that to him. She patted her chest. Her racing heartbeat wasn't able to calm down until now. A few minutes later, Madame Burgess rushed into the bedroom. Looking at Olivia's pale face, Madame Burgess sighed. "Mrs. Miller, what did you do? I've never seen Mr. Miller this angry before." Olivia finally regained her composure. She tucked her hair behind her ears and smiled. "Nothing. It's just a fight." Madame Burgess was upset by the answer. She seated herself next to Olivia. "Mrs. Miller, although he has another woman, I don't think he has feelings for that vixen. Previously, when you were not around, he returned to the Miller residence every day. Take the recent incident, for instance. When you and the young master went missing, he couldn't sleep nor eat well. He fell sick for a long time. His complexion finally regained its color these days. Madame Burgess placed her hands on Olivia's shoulders. Please bear with my nagging. I watched Mr. Miller grow up. You're the only woman he brought home. The feelings he has for you aren't the same as for others. He deserves a punishment for his wrongdoings, but you should consider his genuine feelings. Olivia thought of Ethan's face and sneered. Genuine feelings. Those feelings are too burdensome for me. Mrs. Miller. Enough, Madame Burgess. I know what I'm doing. Olivia didn't want to hear Madame Burgess say good words for him. Madame Burgess sighed deeply. Mrs. Miller, I'm saying this for your sake. It's not like you don't know his character. If you don't compromise, you will eventually be the one at a loss. Olivia was stunned for a second. She didn't like what Madame Burgess said, but they were true. Madame Burgess added, I can tell that he's never going to let you go after what has happened. If you're going to keep your relationship with him rigid, that vixen is going to benefit from it. Mrs. Miller, you still have a long way ahead of you. If you're left with no choice, why not make your life easier? Right now, the route you've chosen is making both you and him suffer. Olivia thought of the incident on the island and the matter she had yet to finish investigating. If Ethan was going to confine her forever, it would be a dead end for her. I understood, Madame Burgess, Olivia said. Good. Men are easy to please. They're like kids. Please don't let that vixen take advantage of your situation, Mrs. Miller. Olivia was still holding Ethan's box. Last night, she figured that she needed to talk to him. But the fight this morning had put her plans on hold. That afternoon, Olivia came across an article online. The delayed engagement ceremony between the Millers and the Carltons was going to be held at the end of the month. There was a picture of Ethan and Marina. He was wearing a stoic face in a gray suit while Marina held onto his arm with a sweet smile. The gray suit was the one Olivia picked for him. They seemed to be a match made in heaven. Olivia felt like her old scars were being reopened painfully. Chapter 173. Madame Burgess, who noticed Olivia's pale face, quickly set her phone aside. Mrs. Miller, why are you reading that? That picture is an eyesore. You should look at heartthrobs in entertainment to make your day. I heard that there's a newly debuted idol group called EXO. The way they twist their waists is really hot. Olivia, who was in a bad mood, chuckled at that. You know this kind of stuff. Madame Burgess placed her hand on Olivia's shoulder. Mrs. Miller, people can never be perfect. We learn what's right or wrong through mistakes. We shouldn't punish ourselves because of others' mistakes. Olivia was surprised to learn that Madame Burgess was actually on her side. Madame Burgess continued, if Mr. Miller divorced you, he could divorce Marina in the future, too. Give yourself some time. I know. Prepare the ingredients. I'll make dinner for tonight, interrupted Olivia, as she didn't want to hear the rest. Madame Burgess' eyes lit at her rare attempt to please Ethan. To Madame Burgess, Olivia and Ethan were the perfect match. She was certain that the engagement was done because of his impulsive decision. Thus, his relationship with Marina wouldn't be able to last long for sure. Okay, I'll call Mr. Miller, Madame Burgess said. Olivia turned her phone off and stood up with a cold expression. She recalled what had happened for the past 2 years. The Fordham family had fallen, and her father was in a coma. Ethan wasn't the sole cause for what happened to her. It was an undeniable fact that love blinded her vision, causing her to forget about others. That was why there was an opening for others to take advantage of her. Olivia didn't have much time left. Hence, she shouldn't waste time by having a fight with Ethan. Didn't people grow up by withdrawing their claws and putting on a mask? The presidential management staff made sure to hush their breaths. Layer upon layer of burden weighed on them. It might take them one trivial mistake to enrage Ethan. Brent stood next to him while holding a huge pile of documents. Ethan's eyebrows had not stopped furrowing since morning. Mr. Miller, the news of your engagement with Miss Carlton has gone viral online, said Brent. Although Ethan didn't respond to that as he read a document, Brent was aware that he was distracted. Not only had he been reading that page for 5 minutes, the document was upside down. I received a call from Madame Burgess. She wants to leave the house. Ethan finally responded. Judging from her scoldings this morning, he assumed that she was causing a ruckus at home to leave. No, Madam Burgess asked if you're going to go home for dinner. Mrs. Miller is making dinner tonight, Brent corrected. Despite the good mood, Ethan snorted. Tell her that I'm busy. After giving it a thought, Brent decided to persuade him. Mr. Miller, a lot of things have happened to Mrs. Miller recently. She's thinner than she was in the past. Please be gentle to her. Ethan pointed at the scratch on his chin. Do you think that she's gentle to me? I bet she has realized her mistake. She's making dinner to make up for it. Ethan threw the document in his hand onto the table. And must I forgive her because of that? Does she think that she's the only one I need? I didn't punish her for escaping, though. Just what does she want me to do? He kept thinking about how Olivia and Jack held hands on the island. Suppressing the churning resentment in him, he let out a long sigh. He slammed the table. Even if I have to jump off this building, I am not going to go home to have dinner with her. Brent relayed the message to Madam Burgess over the phone. 5 minutes later, Ethan's phone rang. Brent didn't know what Olivia said, but he noticed that Ethan's mood was improving. Do as you wish. Ethan hung up the call with a smile. When he met Brent's questioning eyes, he coughed. She wants to bring me dinner. But on her own accord. I didn't force her. Brent was at a loss for words. Chapter 174. No one knew Ethan's favorites better than Olivia. Thus, it should be easy to please him. The only tricky part was whether he would give her the chance. Back then, she had prepared dinner for him a few times as well. Each time, she waited until midnight. Yet, there was no sign of his return. He would give her the cold shoulder without batting an eye. No matter what she said, he wouldn't meet her. Olivia was testing the waters when she called Ethan. Apparently, he wasn't as cruel as he was before. After making dinner, she went to Miller Group by car. She was deeply absorbed in her thoughts while hugging the lunch boxes. The mastermind knew Ethan and Olivia's situation like the back of his hand. Hence, it was highly possible that he was an acquaintance of Ethan's. But who could it be? Kelvin and Brent clearly could not be the mastermind. Madam Burgess was out of the question because she wouldn't be able to keep things to herself. Could it be one of the workers in the Miller Group? Olivia didn't visit him at work before they divorced. At that time, she assumed he was protecting her privacy. Now, it seemed like a joke to her. The public was aware of Ethan and Marina's engagement. It was all over the news. Yet, there wasn't a huge change to Olivia's identity. Be it the past or present, she was kept in the dark like a dirty secret. She took the presidential elevator to go to the highest floor of the building. Every employee had clocked out at this hour. Only Ethan and his secretaries were working overtime. Her feet halted by the door. There were 6 secretaries working for him. She could recognize the 4 men and 2 women. The moment she entered the office, she met eyes with a lady sitting in a corner. The lady adjusted her spectacles. Olivia couldn't see her eyes due to the reflection of the glass. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Miller's office is right ahead. Brent showed Olivia the way. The secretaries were buried in their works. She couldn't observe much from that brief glimpse. In order not to alarm them, she quickly left the area. Brent knocked on the door, and an icy voice came from the inside. Come in. He opened the door for Olivia before taking his leave. The curious secretaries came up to him. Brent, who's that woman? Ethan was known for his aloof attitude toward women. Other than for collaboration purposes, no women had ever shown up at this hour. Brent smacked William Dante's forehead. The latter was the liveliest among the secretaries. You talk too much. Have you finished your work yet? Brent said. William covered his forehead while muttering a few curses under his breath. Brent looked at everyone. Focus on your job. Yes, Brent. Everyone was eager for the gossip, but no one dared to start the discussion first. Meanwhile, Olivia was looking at Ethan, who was working. It was such an irony that she only visited him at work after the divorce. It seemed like he was so preoccupied with work that he didn't acknowledge her arrival. She placed the lunch boxes on the table neatly. The stars twinkled in the somber sky, and the city was illuminated. Ethan appeared stoic under the lights. He didn't spare Olivia a single glance as of now. Pin-drop silence filled the office. She didn't have an inkling to his thoughts. Judging from how he didn't hit her despite her scoldings this morning, she was confident that he wouldn't be physical here. Mustering the courage in her, she approached him. The closer the distance was, the more intense she could feel his presence. Even though he hadn't uttered a word, his presence filled the air. She walked up behind him, wanting to talk nicely with him. However, the moment she saw the back of his head, her hand instinctively grabbed the ashtray. Chapter 175. The ashtray was heavy. It was difficult for Olivia to hold it with one hand. She wondered if the blood would splatter on her face if she flung it at Ethan. Her unconscious thoughts scared even herself, too. At that moment, Ethan looked back at her. They met each other's eyes. Before he could say anything, she asked, "Why did you smoke so much?" When he noticed the ashtray in her hand, the first thing that came to his mind was that Olivia was going to murder him with it. But her question nipped his suspicion. Ethan was wearing an indifferent expression. "Does that have anything to do with you?" His voice was full of disdain. She set the ashtray down. "Next time, she'll use something sharp to finish him off." Suppressing her displeasure, Olivia tugged at the hem of his sleeve. "I crossed the line this morning. I'm sorry." Ethan stared at her face, which appeared paler under the light. She came without makeup. Although she was pretty, she didn't look lively. It still softened a part of his heart all the same. Ethan could never handle it when Olivia acted cute while tugging his shirt. Whenever she acted that way, he could even pluck a star from the sky if she wanted him to. "Where's dinner?" he questioned, finally relaxing the mood. "Here." She gladly went along with it and pushed the meal box in front of him. There was fried chicken, lasagna, salad, and fruit. The cherry tomatoes in the salad were arranged into a heart shape. It was simple, yet it catered to his liking. Ethan, who hadn't been able to have the food she made, stared at the heart-shaped salad for a while. Memories of her first cooking experience crossed his mind. She was clumsy but serious about preparing him a lunchbox. That day, Olivia ended up with a few blisters on her hands. Yet, she presented the nicely plated dish to him with a grin. "Here, I made it. Even if it's not tasty, you gotta finish it." At that time, there was always a smile plastered on her face. Unlike before, she lost self-confidence whenever she stood next to him. Her actions were careful and timid. Noticing Ethan's silence, Olivia prompted gingerly. "These lunch boxes are insulated. The food isn't cold. Give them a try." She handed him the cutleries. The familiar taste melted in his mouth, walking him down memory lane. Is it delicious?" she asked nervously. He was utterly speechless. Since when did she become so timid around him? "Weren't you all fired up this morning?" He raised his gaze to look at her. She pursed her lips. "Sorry, I lost control of my emotions." "Have you eaten?" She lowered her gaze. "I haven't. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to come in time before the food got cold." In actuality, she had eaten her fill at home. He pulled Olivia onto his lap. "Let's eat together." She pretended to be flustered. But Ethan fed her a spoonful of meat. "It's too big of a bite," she grumbled and pouted. He then gave her a smaller bite of chicken. "Here." "Okay." She ate it obediently, hoping that she wouldn't burp. As soon as she wished for that, a burp surged to her throat and escaped her lips. Chapter 176. Olivia's burp was loud in the silent room before stillness inflated in the air. She didn't expect herself to give the game away that quickly. Feeling awkward, she looked at Ethan. "I can explain." She blurted that in the heat of the moment, making matters worse. She observed his expression carefully only to realize that his face was free from annoyance. Worry sat upon his brows instead. She thought, did I misread his expression? He resents me to his bones. Why would he be worried about me? Have more if you're hungry. He gave her a spoonful. She was confused as she thought, does he think that I burp because I'm hungry? In the end, Olivia was stuffed when the meal was actually made for Ethan. Enough. I'm full. She could feel her stomach bursting. He frowned. You're all skin and bones. How could you eat only this little? Then, he fed her another spoonful of lasagna. Her cheeks were puffed like a chipmunk. At this moment, a woman in spectacles opened the door. "Mr. Miller, we need a signature from you for this doc." Never in her life has she imagined herself to witness such a scene. The solemn Ethan, who abhorred contact with women, was hugging and feeding Olivia. His humility put the secretary in a trance. Olivia swallowed the food in a hurry and choked on it. Her face turned red instantly. Water. Ethan gave her a glass of water. How could a grown-up choke on food? She hugged his neck and nuzzled his cheek. I was surprised. That's all. Her gentle voice sent slight shudders across his body. It made his heart flutter. Olivia's breathing was brushing his ears. He turned his head away to look at the shocked secretary. Who told you to come in? Leave. I'm sorry, Mr. Miller. She quickly closed the door. Although she was hugging Ethan's neck, she had been watching that secretary from the corner of her eyes. Everyone around him was on Olivia's suspect list. The opponent's objective was to drive Olivia and Ethan apart. Thus, the opponent wouldn't like it when they were intimate. Too bad there weren't many emotions shown on the secretary's face. As soon as the door was closed, she released him. That secretary is bold. She entered the office without your permission. Jealousy seeped into her tone, and he was in a good mood because of that. She was in a hurry to get her job done, so she didn't think much about it. I'm full. You can dig in. She hopped off Ethan's lap as if she had achieved her objective. Olivia stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, which made her appear petite. Mixed feelings churned in his stomach as Lai watched her back. She was gazing at the illuminated city, where she didn't feel a sense of belonging. He placed the cutleries down without her knowing and came up behind him. Something on your mind? About you and Marina's engagement ceremony. I heard that she's chosen Cherry Blossom Haven as the venue. It'll be gorgeous when the cherry blossoms bloom, she described it with tranquility. Slowly, she turned around and looked at him. Speaking about it, you still owe me a wedding. Chapter 177. When Olivia said that, she forced herself to recall the sad memories so that she could look at Ethan with teary eyes. She knew that being ferocious against him wouldn't do. After all, they were once husband and wife. She knew his character more than anyone else did. Softening his heart was the best option. Her voice was calm, free from complaints and doubts. Tears were pooling in her eyes, too. Although tears can disgust someone, they could be a weapon when it was used at the right time. Now, Ethan's throat parched due to guilt. I know. He lowered his head in self-reproach. He held her shoulders and licked his lip before saying, I know that many things have happened between us. We cannot turn back time either. Let's put an end to Leia's matter. Stay by my side. I'll take good care of you. That was the most significant concession he could make. Frigid numbness shackled her heart. He was the person who hurt her deeply in the past. How could she forget about it only because he promised to look after her? In order not to ruin her plan, Olivia expressed sorrow and rested her head against his chest. Facing her advance, Ethan had never been this nervous before. After all, this was the same woman who yelled while pointing at him fiercely in the morning. Yet, she turned gentle at night. Their interactions were mostly on the edge for the past 2 years. Such a calm moment was rare between them. His body went tense as he quietly waited for her to say something. Ethan, she called. Olivia's soft voice was like a cat's meow, prompting him to hum in response. She continued, we need to talk. I'm all ears, he said. She hugged Ethan's waist and recounted the whole story on the island in a gentle voice. At first, I was trying to rescue Connor. But I fell in love with that place later on. No one hurt me. Everyone on the island was kind to me. I genuinely want to help them. She raised her head to observe his response. When she was certain that he wasn't acting repulsive to that topic, she added, Tom is cheerful, and Jerry is talented in arts. Martha owned only one thermal underwear, but she made it into a diaper for Connor. What do you want me to do? He was surprisingly receptive. Her expression sparked joy as she told him her plan. Got it, he responded. Olivia gazed at Ethan in anticipation. I can develop the island, but on one condition. Her eyes were twinkling in happiness. Say it. The squeaky clean window reflected how he bent over to whisper into her ear. I want you to stay by my side forever. You cannot leave me. Her body shuddered slightly. Previously, he was the person who wanted the divorce. Now, He was the person who wanted her to stay. She couldn't seem to understand him anymore. Considering the few months she had left, she nodded without hesitation. Okay. Her lifetime came with a limitation. There were a few months remaining. Her quick response made Ethan anxious instead. He had more questions in mind, but it would upset both of them since it was related to their fight this morning. He tightened his arms around Olivia's waist. If you leave me, I will burn that island. You know that I do as I say, don't you? His body was warm, unlike his icy tone. Calmly, she tugged his shirt. Ethan, I have a favor to ask you. Chapter 178. It was rare for Olivia to show him her good side. Naturally, Ethan was willing to hear what she had to say. Yes, Ethan was in a good mood. His tone became lighter without his knowing. Olivia said seriously, I do not want to be locked in the house like a pet. I had given up on my studies before. I had only lived in sadness these 2 years. I want to have a fresh start. Let's hear it. Ethan was in a really good mood. That made him more patient, too. Olivia said slowly, I want to work at your side. In the past, she had lived her life as a housewife. She had been contenting with living like that, being loved by him. She was okay with not being in the spotlight. But she thought she was too much of a failure when she realized she didn't know the people Ethan hung around with. She didn't even know who they had offended. If she stayed in the dark, she would always be easily manipulated by that person. Olivia has never been as enlightened as she was. In the past 2 years, someone had been pulling the strings in the shadows. Like her relationship with Ethan, she initially thought that it was only because of Marina. But after she gave it a thought, it couldn't have been her. The person forced them to get a divorce. They even destroyed Leia's gravestone to further worsen her relationship with Ethan. The person's manipulation caused them to be where they were now. The picture she received last month also managed to make matters worse. Olivia almost killed Connor. If she hadn't stopped herself that night, it would have been over between her and Ethan. He would likely torture her to death. What an evil scheme. After she understood everything, she did away with her hostility. She wanted to find the mastermind behind it all with Ethan's help. But she couldn't let Ethan in on her plans. Or else she might risk alerting the mastermind. Ethan was deep in thought. He was scanning her face for a clue. He wanted to know what she was plotting. Olivia looked at him openly and said, I know you don't trust me. That's why I want to work at your side. That's the best way for you to keep an eye on me. I want to learn skills that can help me rebuild the Fordham family. I believe I can accomplish that by learning from you. Olivia knew that was a good excuse. She also knew that Ethan would not suspect anything if she said that. If you have thought it through, I have no objections. Ethan thought she had a point. He should keep her by his side rather than have her cause trouble on her own. He would be able to keep her from trouble if she was close to him. Olivia suddenly thought of something and curled her lips. My only worry is the Carltons. With how our relationship is now, Marina would not allow me to be around you. In the past, Ethan had always stood by Marina's side firmly. Her plans would risk failure if Marina came and made a fuss. Ethan patted her on the head. He said with an icy glare in his eyes, she doesn't get to decide if you stay or not. He then said resolutely, I'm the one who gets to decide that. Olivia nuzzled in his arms and said, Ethan, you're the best. Ethan looked at the cute woman in his embrace. He knew something was not right. But he couldn't put a finger on it. It was as if Olivia became a completely different person overnight. He didn't know if she changed because she finally saw the light or if she was plotting something. But he didn't care anymore. Even if she was plotting something, he thought she would not be able to cause any trouble if he kept her close. So, can I start working tomorrow? Olivia raised her head to look at him seriously. What position do you want? Ethan asked. He didn't mind giving her whatever she wanted. Olivia licked her lips and said, Secretary, the type that stays by your side. Chapter 179. Ethan stared deeply into Olivia's eyes. He wanted to see what she was thinking by reading her expression. What do you want? Olivia was being too weird. He had no idea what she was plotting. Ethan felt uneasy even though she had become more docile. I already told you. I wanted to have a fresh start. I don't want to be in the shadows my whole life. Olivia tugged at Ethan's sleeve lightly. Her muffled voice came from within his embrace. Is that all you want? Ethan said in a strained voice. He did not know what to say. What else can I do? Or are you saying that you're willing to let me go and live in other cities? Ethan tightened his arms around her voice and said coldly, don't even think about it. Olivia smiled bitterly in his arms. He had already said it before. Even in death, she had to stay by his side. She closed her eyes and thought, as you wish. As you wish, Ethan said. The voice in Olivia's head and Ethan's voice were in unison. Olivia raised her head to smile at him and said, are you full? Do you want to eat some more? I'm fine. You should go rest. Olivia broke free from his embrace and said with a serious face, how can I do that? I am going to be your secretary soon. I need to get used to your daily routine. Ethan looked at her deeply. She had a serious expression. He didn't see anything suspicious. Do whatever you want. He went back to his seat while Olivia cleaned up the food containers. She saw Ethan make a call from the corner of her eye. Brent quickly entered the room and stood at the side, awaiting orders. Mr. Miller, Mrs. Miller. Brent addressed them. She will be my personal assistant from now on. Go and make arrangements for that. Brent was shocked. Olivia smiled and said, thanks, Brent. Also, I hope that you can keep my identity a secret. Yes, Mrs. Miller. I'm afraid you'll have to change how you address me. Brent looked at Ethan for confirmation. Ethan nodded at him. Okay. My apologies. Come with me, Olivia. Olivia quickly followed Brent out of the room. Ethan stared at her back as she was leaving. He decided that he would keep her close. No matter what she was plotting, she would not be able to cause any trouble with him watching. He went back to his work after he came to that conclusion. But for some reason, he was in a better mood than before. Olivia followed Brent to the corridor. Brent looked around and saw that nobody was near. He said, Mrs. M.I. are you sure you want to do this? It's better to be able to work than to be locked up at home. At least this way, I get to go out. Olivia shrugged and said, I'll be in your care then. Thanks. You're welcome. After that, Brent took Olivia to the secretary's office and introduced her to everyone. The others were shocked to see a personal assistant join them out of the blue. But they welcomed her warmly. I'll arrange for you to have a desk tomorrow. You can just familiarize yourself with the other people tonight. Understood. After Brent left, the 6 people in the office stared at her. But since they all worked under Ethan, they didn't ask her anything, even if they were curious. Olivia, I'll brief you on Mr. Miller's habits in a bit. The one who spoke was William Dante. He was in charge when Brent wasn't around. He was holding a stack of documents, and his back was straight. He didn't look like an office worker but more like an army man. Thanks, Mr. Dante. William proceeded to introduce the others to her. This is Aaron Dante, Tiago Bingley, and Clint Bingley. Olivia had already heard about them before she arrived. Aaron and William were brothers. Tiago and Clint were cousins. William pointed to the 2 remaining female assistants and said, they are Grace Engel and Nancy Giles. Nice to meet you, everyone. My name is Olivia Fordham. I'll be in your care. Olivia introduced herself with confidence. But her eyes were watching their expressions closely. Chapter 180. Olivia thought that the secretaries would be her suspects if the person who manipulated her life was indeed hiding close to Ethan. Olivia was observing their expressions to see if they would reveal their true colors. But they were calm and composed. They greeted her and went back to work. Olivia touched her wrist. Was she wrong about that? She decided not to rush things. She decided to probe Grace first. She was the most recently recruited secretary other than herself. Olivia moved next to Grace. Grace's attitude towards her wasn't particularly friendly. But she also didn't look down on her. Olivia spent nearly 2 hours next to all the secretaries. She wasn't able to find anything suspicious about them. Brent allowed them to go home after they did overtime until 9 p.m. Nancy was full of smiles as soon as she got off work. She massaged her back and started to call her friends. It seemed like she was headed to a bar and was asking someone to save her a seat. She saw Olivia looking at her and gestured to Olivia with her chin. You wanna come with me? It's a new bar. Lots of handsome guys. It can be your welcome party. Olivia didn't expect her to get friendly so suddenly. She waved her hands and said, I can't. I still have some documents to tend to. I haven't even memorized Mr. Miller's preferences yet. Nancy withdrew her gaze from Olivia and said, all right, maybe next time. Nancy was already walking away while talking. Aaron put his palm on his forehead and said, stay away from her. She's a bad influence. She flirts with men all the time. Olivia smiled sheepishly and looked at Grace. Grace was not a particularly beautiful woman. She looked very different compared to Nancy's charming appearance. She reminded Olivia of a teacher's pet. Someone who wears glasses and has plain looks but always excelled academically. Grace was packing her stuff up calmly. Her desk was very neat. It was like she had obsessive-compulsive disorder. Every single document was arranged neatly. She felt Olivia's gaze and looked at Olivia. Then, she said emotionlessly, how can I help you? Her voice was calm. Olivia wasn't able to discern any emotion from her words. It was like she was a robot. Even though her tone was flat, her words sent chills down Olivia's spine. Olivia smiled innocently at her and said, Miss Engel, your earrings are so pretty. I couldn't help but stare at them. Where did you buy them? The earrings were the only accessory on Grace's person. They were small and shaped like roses. There were diamonds in the center of the earrings that shined brightly. These are custom made as per Mr. Miller's order. They were my year-end bonus for the year before. Grace said in a calm voice. Is that so? Then I have to work hard to shoot for this year's year-end bonus. Olivia said while punching her fist in the air. Grace glanced at her and left after slinging her backpack on. William chipped in and said, don't think too much about it. She has always been cold. Olivia said gently, does this mean she's always been like that? That's right. I've barely ever seen her smile since she started working here. Although she's a cold person, she works rather efficiently. They chatted for a little bit more. Olivia was the last one to leave the office. She didn't go far and waited at the underground parking lot. Ethan rolled down the car window and said coldly, get in. Olivia followed him back to the Miller residence. This was the first time they went home from work together. Olivia was deep in thought on the ride home. The people she met at the office today all had different personalities. They all looked suspicious in their own way. Having regrets. Ethan had been typing on his laptop since he got in the car. It was unexpected for him to show her concern. He adjusted his glasses and said, you can still change your mind now.